Resting peacefully under a mile-wide canopy of water, the Archelons snore up Kyra's buried O2. Slumbering within Tidal's bubble, the giant turtles spend precious units immersed in pure oxygen. Threshold's ceiling hangs well above them, and the Ark spend every nano they can breathing in health. Here on the sleep mesa, they snooze safely while Tidal rises to Xenix's challenge in the distant sky. Jutting up from the ocean floor, the bale of massive reptiles rests atop a rocked spire. Tall and skinny like a pool cue, the riser is similar to shiprock in the desert plains of New Mexico, only still underwater. At its summit is a tabletop surface big enough for 100 full-sized arcs if they play nice. Eni is among them and would be lucky to survive their company. Kyra's second sun is near to bursting, and tidal fall will soon end this blissful nap. When it comes to waking, the shelled tanks are as ornery as an elephant seal, and just as big. Now a pre-adult, Eni is roughly the size of a manhole cover and could be fattened into one if she isn't careful. Finding a spot on the sleep mesa is all about timing. The old guard takes their place just as Tidal's edge begins to climb, nestling into bed before sundown like Grandpa used to. The approach assures a seat at the table, or bed rather, but it is dangerous to get too comfortable too soon. It was a fellow juvenile who showed Eni this place, and the two enjoyed company in the open space. That is until an adult bull splashed out of the water ceiling above them and landed on the poor boy like an armored car. To secure a spot safely, Eni has learned to arrive when Threshold's climbing edge kisses the elevated sleeping surface. By then, much of the mesa is taken, but there are still nooks and crannies between boulder-sized bodies. Still nimble in the water, Eni can find a place amongst the dozing generals without fear of something larger crushing her. Comfortable and safe, the bubble of Tidal's retracting arms envelops her. Lungs open, she bathes in the soothing wake of pure O2. Siestas drowning in oxygen are glorious, but never long enough. Above the sleeping Archelon, Tidal's lagging edge has reached its maximum elevation and will rise no further. Fathoms above, Eclipse End has dazzled Kyra's terrestrial surface, thereby freeing Tidal of his obligation. The supernova's magnificence is completely unknown in these depths, but no more magical than the sunken sapphire we are about to explore. A hissing sound cuts through the snoring, and the bubble collapses in motion. It won't take long for the water curtain to reach the sleep mesa, and any ark still dozing will be bust by falling water. The enormous turtles groggily open their eyes and begin to twitch and stir in place. Their mobility is limited until the liquid ceiling lowers to their level, but they take time to spill waste and ready for liftoff. The arks close their lungs just before the canopy hits them, and then updive into Tidal's waiting arms. Sealed for another true night, they climb the water column with deep thrusts from their door-sized flippers. Eni is still asleep when Tidal engulfs the plateau and her nostrils are bucketed with salt water. Hacking but alive, the alarmed teenager powers through the shock and lifts off into the falling water. Clearing the sleep mesa, she chases after the sinking floor to take back her nap's final breath. Deftly hovering in the falling water, she flips herself upside down and pokes her head into what's left of Threshold. The relief of gas exchange evaporates her bleariness and she snaps into focus. Just before crashing into the ocean floor, Eni pulls her head back into the water. Sealed and collected, she plunges up into the dark deep. Below the sleep mesa lies a glowing blue basin, Pallas. One of Kyra's sunken jewels, Pallas is a pocket of ocean floor with the aforementioned pool cue at its scepter. Surrounded by mountain, it is a gleaming Bombay star in the otherwise coffin dark water and has all the facets of the Orient's blue giant. Illuminating the sea floor are bottomless trenches of indigo, a dozen feet across and hundreds long. These electric blue stripes cut across Pallas like black on a zebra, or better yet, a tiger. Almost like lungs, Kyra uses these openings as mines to draw up life-giving O2 entombed in the crust below. The surface here is active, ebbing and flowing with the presence of the second sun. During true night, when Pallas is wet, Kyra's lungs are idle and smolder underwater like blue lava. When Pallas is dry, the cobalt gases boil with effervescence in the open air, filling the lumen of Xenix's drawn syringe until both sun and bubble burst. While dramatic, the Pallas rhythm is banal to the point of torture. The birth of threshold not only repeats every cycle, but this theater is also replicated throughout Caira's infinite sea floor. For the air breathing, the blue basin is an essential but otherwise unremarkable jewel in a royal tiara. For Tidal, however, the gracious but reluctant riser, Pallas is just another agonizing prick from his crown of thorns. Down here, the surplus of O2 enables life into an alien metropolis of the weird and wily. Most numerous are the trilobites, small marine arthropods that are a cross between a horseshoe crab and a roly-poly. One of the most successful animals in Earth's history, trilobites are also an alumnus of the Cambrian explosion. First emerging 520 million Earth years ago, trilobites existed for 270 million years and evolved into 20,000 different species. These creatures had early sensory organs like lensed eyes and retractable antennae, but went extinct during the Great Dying 20 million years before the first dinosaurs appeared. Trilobites were among the first fossils ever discovered and drew new attention to old Earth. Their hard exoskeleton preserves well, and they are abundant to the point of being index fossils. Trilobites have been found all over the world and, like Lystrosaur and Glossopteris, help us better understand continental drift and the age of Earth. The largest trilobites were 6 feet long, but these Pallas beetles are only about the size of your middle finger. Busy scavenging organic matter off the ocean floor, they are indifferent to Tidal's flux. They eat and walk regardless of wetness and use their antennae to probe the rubbled surface for rotting detritus. A cornucopia of beetles have congregated around a severed head with a toothed blade spinning in its mouth. The trilobes will forage on Spiral's remains until there is nothing left but a whirl of harmless nubs. Meticulous and steady, they convert dead flesh into living, their feeding limbs more like the fingers of a courtroom reporter. Gradually, their abdomens swell into rich bellies of bug meat, and the ripening doesn't go unnoticed. Hovering above the colony of scavengers is a peculiar opportunist waiting to strike. Cameroceras was one of the first apex predators and one is one of the oddest creatures you'll ever come across. The first fossils of this animal were found in Canada in the 1880s, and it took another 100 years for the full form of this abnormal shrimp to come into focus. A contemporary of trilobites, Cameroceras also emerged out of the Cambrian cauldron. Their body plan is flat and diamond-shaped like a flounder or halibut, but covered by a crunchy exoskeleton. Giants in their time, Cameroceras was a foot long with a fluke-like tail at one end and a pair of armored tentacles at the other. Curling out of its mouth like a pair of elephant trunks, Cameroceras used these powerful extensions to grab prey and hold it vulnerable for a ruinous mouth filled with serrated prongs. Circling above the clueless trilobites, Atom must hold his attack until Tidal fully collapses. He swims above the beetle platter in a sine wave motion, his anticipation accentuated by a row of flittering flaps along his flanks. Wriggling like bony toes, these flaps give Atom an eerily elegant form as he ribbons through the water, which is now even with the ocean floor. The trilobes take no notice of the encroaching predator at first, but they start closing like clams when Atom begins poking around with his things. The frightened beetles are quick and would be safe if they conceal themselves from penetration. The Cameroceras must act fast, and Atom skillfully wedges his feelers into an all but closed crevice. Frantic, the Pallas beetle tries to resist, but Atom's extensions are too strong, and they force her into an open position. Curling around the prey like steel cables bringing up an anchor, Atom's twin armored appendages have the trilobite pinned helpless in front of his waiting mouth. Taking aim amidst hundreds of quivering legs, the Cameroceras bears his wretched opening and devours her undercarriage. Watching Atom slurp up entrails is another predator. Titanic and patient, she does not bother with pillbugs. Like Atom, she noticed the assembling cast of trilobites, but isn't interested in their meager innards. She wants larger game, abnormal shrimp, for example, and is willing to wait for them to come out into the open. A pterygotus, she is a giant sea scorpion with a set of enormous roach-clipped pincers and a powerful lobster-like tail. 7 feet long, Stacy's kind last existed during the Devonian period, 370 million years ago, and were among the biggest insects to ever inhabit your planet. Pterygotus is the largest in a genus of extinct marine arthropods called eurypterids, known informally as sea scorpions. Eurypterids first evolved at the end of the Cambrian period, 485 million Earth years ago, and occupied all manner of water environments, from oceans to brackish to fresh. They have a dual respiratory system that enables oxygen extraction from both water and air. This allowed some species to exist in terrestrial environments and later become modern-day scorpions. Hidden between the smoldering blades of blue, Stacy glides into position. Settling just out of sight, she uses her delicate walking appendages to creep up on the suckling shrimp. Stacy's meek front legs couldn't support her on dry land, but they make her nimble in the low gravity of Pallas aqueous. The Anomalocaris detects another presence in the water, but he assumes it is also after the beetles. Coming into view like Spaceball 1, Atom takes no notice of Stacy's gargantuan form. Her slender snappers poke out of the shadows first, followed by a seemingly endless body of clicking segments. Atom begins to sense danger when the Pterygotus doesn't go for the trilobites. Knowing he is on the menu instead, the Anomalocaris ribbons up from the sea floor, his catch still coiled in plaited tentacles. Not immediately giving chase, Stacy seems safely out of range. But the Pterygotus is more explosive than she lets on. Before the Anomalocaris can get away, her streamlined claws bullet through the water and catch Atom's flukes as he attempts to flee. Her pincers bite down like jumper cables, crushing the shrimp's bristle tail. The force is so great that it actually cracks through the crusty fin completely, allowing Atom to escape, albeit maimed. The shrimp's once elegant sinusoidal curve now resembles a chaotic electrical wire spitting life at one end. Driving her powerful tail against the seafloor, Stacy whips herself into a threatening cobra pose and draws herself level with the struggling Anomalocaris. His appetite gone, Atom unravels what's left of the trilobite and flares his armored trunks in defense. The posturing is foolish, and Stacy snatches at the opened appendages with ferocious speed. His forward limbs caught, the rest of the abnormal shrimp wriggles in protest, as if it were a Confederate flag burning in the wind. The Pterygotus has him now, and Stacy's lean arms prepare to shuck the Anomalocaris like an ear of corn. A tearing seam opens between Atom's molesting tentacles, and down the middle, the sea scorpion rips him in half. Separated, Atom's flanks writhe in Stacy's pincers like frightened earthworms. Wrapping around the sea scorpion's clamped claws, what's left of the Anomalocaris' consciousness struggles to avoid being eaten. Patiently and with the skill of a surgeon, the Pterygotus unfurls one of Atom's flanks and then proceeds to devour the abnormal shrimp like a pair of baby back ribs. Here in Pallas, lady scorpions reign supreme, partially because they are the largest stable predator, but mostly because males aren't smart enough to avoid the gaps. Menfolk always seem hopelessly curious and wander into a blue thinny sooner or later, never to be heard from again. It isn't necessarily their fault. Females are differently enchanted by Kairos magic and can live to be ancient if they stay sharp. Stacy herself is over 100 quanta and has shucked her fair share of shrimp. Limited by her weight when tidal is up, Pallas aqueous is her time to harvest, and much like the Ark's bubble siesta, each unit is precious. Above the glimmering gashes she glides, slipping in and out of their indiglow. A swimming spider, she scans the metropolis through compound eyes, looking for motion, big, small, it doesn't matter. Here in Pallas, lady scorpions reign supreme. Of course, that doesn't stop a passing fool from biting off more than he can chew. In this instant, it is restless Nemo, a noble but rebellious creature. He finds himself perpetually evicted without ever leaving home. A cameroceras, he is a giant orthoconic cephalopod, or in simpler terms, a huge squid stuffed inside a shell. Upwards of 20 feet long, Nemo has the tentacled face of a cuttlefish with the hardened shell of a hermit crab. Only, other than a fish-shaped conch, Nemo's shell is an elongated cone like those filled with ice cream, giving cameroceras the bulk of its length. Inside the aesthetically pleasing but awkwardly hulking casing is a soft tissue body called a mantle, which is fed through a beaked mouth at the nucleus of Nemo's tentacles. Like modern squid, Nemo's eyes are enormous and caught Pallas's blue blush flickering off the seamounts. Without knowing why, he is drawn to the blue thinnies, but the rhythm here doesn't suit him. What cameroceras has in streamlined beauty, it lacks in mobility. As Nemo's waffle cone has grown over his lifetime, it burdens him more and more. Under the circumstances, his best life would be somewhere stationary with plenty of food passing by, a place where threshold cannot dry him out, but such a solution is as dull as it is practical. Unwilling to accept the truth, Nemo always banishes himself whenever the fear of confinement sets in, but it isn't necessarily his fault. This impatience with reality may be a consequence of how cameroceras went extinct. Nemo is in a class of animals that evolved after the Cambrian era during the Ordovician period, 485 to 443 million Earth years ago. This epoch is known for its diversification of life, otherwise known as the Ordovician radiation. It was a time when Earth's continents were well dispersed, allowing for warmer climates and nutrient-rich ecosystems. However, like all changes, there was collateral damage. Phytoplankton and the first terrestrial plants appeared during this time and thrived in the new environment. They flourished by taking in CO2 from the atmosphere and did so in such abundance that the planet actually cooled. So cool, in fact, that seawater soaked up into glaciers, draining shallow seaways that cameroceras called home. Nemo's ancestors literally perished in place, struggling against their mass as they desiccated. Diseased by their futile twitch, Nemo has the blood of a Corleone with the impish sense of a sun stepped over. Nearing the basin floor, the cameroceras flays his tentacles, his cone pointing skyward. He has spent the last few cycles hungry in complete darkness and begins probing the seabed for food. Unlike the Black Abyss, there are easy pickings here, and Nemo snacks on palace beetles while his eyes explore the glowing underworld around him. Beaking through trilobe exoskeleton, Nemo's gaze catches something in the distance. He rotates around his vertical axis and confirms the movement with each eye. A beautifully elongated creature with busy arms blinking between Pallas's blue streaks. The cameroceras is captivated and scuttles laterally to position himself in its path. Drawing closer, Nemo prepares his opening move. Revived by the bug meat, he springs up from the ocean floor and attempts to ensnare whatever is approaching. Arms wider than a toddler's at pickup, the cameroceras hopes his tingling suckers will find more food, or perhaps even a female. Tickled by the unknown, Nemo's tongue-like radula flickers just inside his gaping beak. Barreling into opportunity is just this rascal's nature, but he won't come away in one piece this time. The target of his assault, Stacy, has no interest in rocking Nemo's world. Half his length, the pterygotus is too big to be eaten, but she isn't accustomed to backing down. Once again rearing like a cobra, she holds her position and snips at the probing tentacles. Undeterred, Nemo continues violating the lady scorpion, not yet committed to eating or mating with the female. Overwhelmed by the number of attacking extensions, Stacy tries to flee. Beating her tail, she heads for higher water, but Nemo is able to wrap his members around her fluke, pulling her back like a pinball lever. Now on the defensive, the lady scorpion rolls back to face her attacker and launches at the mob of limbs with her surgical pincers. Although menacing and powerful, Stacy's claws are simply not enough to fend off her attacker. With every appendage she can pull off, another of Nemo's finds her flank. Unrelenting, the cameroceras entangles the pterygotus in a rubbery web and draws the female closer to his flicking tongue. Back on the seafloor, Nemo has Stacy pinned with his erection of a shell sticking straight up. Excited to the point of insanity, the cameroceras fails to appreciate his own vulnerability. The squid's phallic form has attracted attention, but not the kind Nemo wants. Perhaps charming and impressive to the right female, the upright coned squid also resembles a piece of bacon dangling from the breakfast table. Chomping through Nemo's shaft is a bear-trap pair of jaws followed by 25 feet of fish. Looking more machine than animal, Dunkleosteus has an armored skull with self-sharpening sheet metal teeth. They lived during the late Devonian period and were upwards of 30 feet. Weighing 4 tons, Dunkleosteus' bite was extraordinary, not only for its crocodile-like force and speed, but also because of the vacuum created by its enormous mouth upon opening, capable of sucking in fleeing prey. Only the head of Dunkleosteus fossilizes, so we can only speculate what lay behind its massive cranium. The assumption is a familiar fish body plan with 2 pairs of pectoral fins and a thresher shark tail. Originally discovered in 1873, Dunkleosteus was named in 1956 after David Dunkel, a renowned paleontologist and museum curator in Cleveland, Ohio. They are the largest in a family of prehistoric fish called placoderms, which all had the same body design of an armored head and naked body. Placoderms lived throughout the Devonian period, 420 to 358 million Earth years ago. And like T-Rex, Dunkleosteus was a menace towards the end of its era. Except, rather than the phoenix, Dunkleosteus died out during the Hangenberg incident, an anoxic period at the end of the Devonian, a fate similar to Nemo's ancestors 100 million years earlier. Ivor's kind came to Kyra to escape severely low oxygen levels, combined with glaciation and a drop in sea levels. Brittle and hollow, the cameroceras' shell is no match for the Dunkle's crushing jaws. The crazed squid snaps out of his lust and prematurely climaxes a cloud of murky liquid into the blue-lit water. Taking advantage of the chaos, Daisy untangles herself from Nemo's once virile arms and snips off a piece of calamari for the road. The plume of ink dissipates as Ivor chomps through the vacated chamber. Damaged but alive, Nemo is now free to live out his life as a twitchy tangle of tentacles, poking in and out of whatever holes he can find. The cameroceras' discarded cage does little to satisfy the Dunkle's hunger, but it wasn't a quest for food that brought Ivor to Pallas. Something in the water has drawn him to this place, and wrecking through the shelled squid's baggage was just a detour. Ivor has come to Pallas for fleshy sustenance of a different variety, lured by the scent of a female. Available evidence suggests that placoderms like Dunkleosteus reproduced much the way humans do, with face-to-face sexual contact, missionary style, with male inserting his clasper into a resting female's cloaca. Interestingly, fossils of Dunkleosteus' armored face typically have gouges, puncture marks, and fractures, which suggest interspecies combat, possibly a consequence of mating behavior. Gliding through flecks of blue light, Ivor gracefully swishes his tail the way a panther dangles his. There is a female nearby, he can sense it. Circling the basin mindlessly, his clasper awakens out of him, revealing his sex to anyone interested. His arousal has reached an intermediate plateau when a large body passes beneath him. Grazing his member, the sensation catches Ivor off guard and accelerates the male Dunkle's pleasure to a new level. Below and in front of him is a hulking heifer bearing her cloaca. Starla swims upside down, her pace just faster than the male's, the idea being to tease the bull into chase. She displays her opening while using her keen eyes to seek out a spot to consummate. The lady need eventually slows near a preferred locale, and the male Dunkleosteus, consumed with lust, plows the female into the ocean floor. Grinding into her open crevice, Ivor now appreciates the size of the Lady Dunkle. Starla is a magnificent specimen, even larger than he. This is his first encounter with a female, and her body movements indicate experience he lacks. When his clasper is fully inside the female, it opens like an umbrella to release Ivor's seed into Starla's waiting womb. For a micro, he holds his key inside her, emptying his essence through her lock. When the action is complete, the female squirms out from underneath, and Ivor is left in a daze. His buoyancy carries him up from the sea floor, his body clouded in post-coitus bliss. He doesn't notice it, but something has changed. High above, first light has broken, and it won't be long before threshold rises again. But that isn't it. Starla, as he knows her, is gone, and the impregnated female now has other needs on her mind. The male Dunkle's eyes burst open when he feels his mate's mandibles. Far from a tickle, Starla's gaping mouth bites down on Ivor's exposed belly. He is finished before even knowing what hit him. Pleasure dissipating from his mind as confusion takes his final moments. He doesn't feel the pain of being eaten alive, just the sense of his lust fading, like the green of autumn. For a moment it was beautiful, but now Ivor's life force must follow his seed. Starla will integrate her mate's organic matter into their growing offspring, and whatever she doesn't eat will become carrion for buggy scavengers. It is a brutal pleasure, and one she has enjoyed hundreds of times. Here in Pallas, ladies reign supreme.